A new favorite to be the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk about it here on this episode of Eagles Latest right here on FanArch. I'm your host, Cory Nidoh. Well, there was some surprising news coming out of the NFL yesterday up in Buffalo as the Bills fired head coach Sean McDermott after another frustrating exit from the playoffs. It seemed like the Buffalo Bills were destined to finally get to the Super Bowl with Josh Allen and potentially end the curse that franchise has had trying to win their first Super Bowl, and it was not to be as they lost in heart-wrenching fashion to the Denver Broncos over the weekend. Now, Josh Allen certainly has some blame to shoulder. He turned the ball over a good amount of times, but in the end, the Bills decided that it was McDermott who was going to fall on the sword, and they are going to look for a new head coach. And you might be saying, well, what does that have to do with the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, with that move, it could potentially start a snowball effect where other coaches might want to leave ship, and that includes the highly regarded offensive coordinator in Joe Brady. Brady is one of the brightest offensive minds in the NFL, and he's already receiving interest and interviews for head coaching vacancies in the NFL, and I'm sure he will be also receiving interview interest and requests as an offensive coordinator, and the Philadelphia Eagles should make Joe Brady atop their list now with this news coming out yesterday. Brady, 36 years old, he's a seasoned play caller. With his time with the Carolina Panthers, he worked with Teddy Bridgewater in his first year, and then Sam Darnold, who got off to a fast start in 2022, was let go by the Panthers after some injuries and a quarterback carousel took place. And then he was with the Buffalo Bills, and he started out as a passing game coordinator, then got bumped up to the OC. And the Bills' offense, as we know, one of the most electrifying, one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL over the last 4 or 5 years since Josh Allen took over at quarterback. Now, of course, it's Josh Allen, right? League MVP. He's one of the best, if not, you can argue, the best quarterback in the NFL, depending on who you want to talk to. But this is a coordinator that just gets it. And the Eagles were already on his trail back in 2021. They interviewed Brady for the head coaching job, opted to go with Nick Sirianni. So now if you're Brady, perhaps you don't want to deal with a new regime change up in Buffalo and you want to test the waters. Maybe he becomes a head coach. But if Brady likes the scenery here in Philadelphia, it could potentially springboard him into a head coaching job in 2027. We've seen that with Shane Steichen, and we've seen that also with Kellen Moore, the last two offensive coordinators for the Eagles that have been able to propel themselves to that head man job. Now, it's not going to be easy. I do think this is kind of a long shot for the Eagles and really for any team looking for Brady's services as just an offensive coordinator. With over a quarter of the league needing new head coaches, this might be one of the best years to be a hot commodity, and that is certainly what Joe Brady is at this point, especially with the surprising news that was somewhat unexpected up in Buffalo, and now Brady can kind of have his pick of the litter on where he might want to go and if he wants to become a head coach or still stay as an offensive coordinator, and we'll see how that goes from there. But this is a guy that the Eagles really should do everything they can to get in the building. You look at what the Bills even did this year. They had the leading rusher in James Cook, and they didn't have an alpha wide receiver. The Eagles have A.J. Brown still on their roster. We're going to talk about Brown in just a moment, and Devontae Smith. Of course, Saquon Barkley. You got Jalen Hurts as well. So this is an offense that already has more weapons than Buffalo, and if he can instill that philosophy of everybody eats and everybody can buy into it, well, then that could make this offense for the Eagles extremely explosive, extremely dangerous, and they could get back on track and becoming one of the best offenses that they should be with the star power and money that has been tied in to this offensive unit. So keep an eye out for Joe Brady. If you're an Eagles fan, you definitely want him to get an interview with Philadelphia. Obviously, they said that they are going to cast a wide net. They certainly are doing that. They're interviewing offensive coordinators, passing game coordinators that may not have been on anybody's radar, but they also, I think, are doing this to pick and pluck information from all these smart offensive-minded coaches so they can kind of analyze, okay, this is what we need to do to fix this offense. Because obviously, if you're interviewing these coaches, you're going to be asking, okay, well, what can you do to increase our offensive output after we had a really stagnant year under Kevin Patullo? So it's a smart move by the Eagles. I do think they're still going to go and hire a big name like a Joe Brady, like a Mike McDaniel, perhaps. Brian Daboll might be now out of the picture because of his relationship and success with Buffalo years prior with Josh Allen. He might now be the front runner for the head coaching job up there. But the Eagles still do have a handful of quality candidates to talk to and choose from when the time comes. Now, who they decide to hire also could pay off in a big way to keep their star wide receiver happy in A.J. Brown. There was a report out a couple days ago that basically said that A.J. Brown requested trades 3 times this past season. That's coming from Bleeding Green Nation, and according to the author and the sources, Brown was not happy in Philly. He was requesting a trade as early as that Week 3 game against the Rams, which is a little hard to believe considering he went for over 100 yards, had a touchdown. The Eagles were winning. They won the game. They started off 3-0, 4-0 the season. But nonetheless, the report came out, and there's been things that have been kind of coming out as of late, knocking Jalen Hurts as to be expected. Now with this, with A.J. Brown. And again, I'm in the camp where you don't trade A.J. Brown, right? Howie Roseman didn't give a definitive no in the end of the season press conference if A.J. Brown would be traded. But he did say, we are trying to find players like A.J. Brown, not trade them. So that, to me, believes that Howie Roseman would like to keep the wide receiver, but also at that point in time, obviously didn't have an answer or a decision made up of what they are going to do. Now, Jimmy Kempski, does a great job breaking down the financial aspect of it with the dead money cap hit and how they could finagle it. And if they do trade A.J. Brown after June 1st, it's still not ideal, but the cap hit will be spread out over the next 2 seasons, which is a little bit more digestible for the Eagles and their financial situation. But the Eagles, they're really not afraid of taking that dead cap hit. Obviously, the whole Carson Wentz situation, that involved that as well. But if you're Howie Roseman and the Eagles, you don't want to trade A.J. Brown. I mean, he's 29 years old. His down season, it's still recorded over 1,000 yards. He had 7 touchdowns on the year, and that was a down year. Now, if you get a guy like Joe Brady or Mike McDaniel or one of these creative offensive minds, now you bring AJ into the building and say, hey, this is what we've got going on. This is our plan. This is our goal to get you involved more. What do you think? And now the ball is back in AJ's court. And now he can say, yeah, I'm here. I don't want to go anywhere. Or he doesn't believe it, and he may very well request a trade because it does seem that he does want to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And that's his prerogative. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, there's fans that will say, oh, get him off the team. He's not a team player. Doesn't want to win more Super Bowls. I'm sure he still wants to win more Super Bowls, but it does seem like he is more focused on racking up the numbers and compiling those statistics so he can be enshrined in Canton, Ohio one day. And every player has a right for that goal. A.J. Brown certainly is on that trajectory. So we'll see how this situation pans out. I still think that this offense is way better with A.J. Brown on it. I know there's people who believe that Devontae Smith could be a number 1 wide receiver, but I think they are also kind of forgetting he's having the success he's having because defenses have to game plan and take away A.J. Brown. So if they're doubling A.J. Brown, that means somebody else is left open. And right now, Devontae Smith had a really good year, was on pace for a career year this season. Again, nothing against Devontae Smith. I've been on this podcast saying pound for pound, I think he's one of the best wide receivers, but he just doesn't truly have that number one mantra, and it helps when you have A.J. Brown alongside him. Now, did A.J. Brown lose a step? You watch the film, and you can make an argument like, yeah, A.J. Brown isn't as explosive. He isn't getting off the line as quick, but I still think he's a very good player and a player that the Eagles need to keep at least for one more season. But again, if he wants to trade, well, then that's a whole different ball game, and he wants out. And it's a shame. He puts together 4 or 5 really good years in Philadelphia, climbing the franchise record book statistically as a wide receiver, and ultimately came here to bring the city a championship, and that's what he did. So we'll see how that pans out, but I do think it might go hand in hand on who the Eagles hire as an OC and with A.J. Brown. Speaking of other coaches on the staff for the Philadelphia Eagles, Christian Parker once again is getting some interest. He's expected to interview with the Dallas Cowboys, and then now it just came out from Jordan Schultz that he is also expected to now be getting interviewed by the Green Bay Packers. So this is a really bright-minded coach. He's been the defensive back coach over the last 2 years. Obviously has worked with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, getting them to all-pro status this season. He spent time with Denver from 21 to 23, worked with Patrick Surtain II, who's arguably one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, and then also before that got his start with Green Bay in 2019 and 2020, and worked with Jair Alexander, who was regarded as one of the best corners in the league before he had his drop-off over the last couple of seasons. So Christian Parker, everybody loves him in the Eagles organization. There's been some great articles by Zach Berman and Andrew DiCecco regarding what Parker brings to an NFL team and coaching staff. He has been really, really impressive, and now he's starting to get a lot more interest over the last few days, and he's expected to interview with Dallas and Green Bay in succession over the next couple of days. So certainly something to keep an eye out for because the Eagles might need to hire or look for a new defensive back coach if Parker opts to go elsewhere and become a defensive coordinator for maybe the Cowboys or the Packers or even another team, because the offseason is just getting started. So great news for Christian Parker. Not the best news for the Philadelphia Eagles. I do think that could be a big blow, but time will tell and see what Parker opts to do. Last but not least, the Eagles also will have some representation in the Senior Bowl that will take place later this month. And it's a nice way for the Eagles to get some inside information, a close look, a first look at some of the top seniors across the country, as the Eagles certainly have plenty of needs along the offensive line, tight end, a cornerback, safety. I mean, there are some holes on this roster moving into the offseason where they are going to need to address it. And Clint Hurt is going to be the head coach of the national team, and running backs coach Jamal Singleton is the offensive coordinator for the Senior Bowl, and that will be certainly something to keep an eye out for as well. So the Eagles will have a little representation there for the Senior Bowl, and that is the Panini Senior Bowl, which will be just right around the corner. It's hard to believe, but certainly something to watch there as the Eagles will try and do some self-scouting real quick and look at what players might pop out to them during this week leading up to the Senior Bowl. Clint Hurt's obviously going to be working with these guys and getting a close-up look on some of these top players. So not a bad avenue for the Eagles to explore and get maybe a leg up on the rest of the league, with Hurt and company leading the way for the national team. So that will just about do it for this episode of Eagles Latest. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe, drop a like, drop a comment. What are your thoughts? Do you want Joe Brady as the new offensive coordinator for the Eagles, or do you still want somebody else like a Mike McDaniel, a Cliff Kingsbury, anybody that's still out there? The Eagles have been interviewing a handful of coaches, and there are still plenty more to come. There's plenty more coming your way right here on Eagles Latest throughout the week. Make sure you stay locked in here on FanArch. And again, as always, thanks so much for watching.